This is Red Corner, Blue Corner, right here on Stadium. Really glad you're joining us on this Monday. Got a lot to get into, but before we do that, we got to do the intros. Jake Butt, the Michigan Wolverine, had a great time, I'm sure, in Indianapolis over the weekend. Got to watch your Wolverines win their third straight
Back-to-back
Big Ten championship.
New challenge ahead. They got to break through the next ceiling at the college football playoff. But this is Joshua Perry, the national champion, the captain of the Ohio State Buckeyes, and a guy I'm excited to dive into this show this week going forward. It's the postseason, baby. Let's get it rocking.
We got a lot to talk about. I'm sure we got some things we're going to disagree on here. Before we get to all that, we want to welcome you into the show. You are the people that make this thing go. Make sure you scan that QR code on the screen to submit your content. You can also go to watchstadium.com/submit questions, videos, all the things we want them. You can give us a follow as well on Instagram, red_corner_blue corner. But let's get to that playoff that you were mentioning there. And the field is set with Michigan as the #1 seed, and they get to play fourth-ranked Alabama, not Florida State. The Seminoles finished the season undefeated after winning the ACC championship game over Louisville. But a lot of consternation about their final ranking sitting there at number 5. Did Florida State get snubbed?
So let's just, we've had this conversation, JP, and I said, hey, I even said, I want to see how Florida State looks without their quarterback, right? My issue, though, is the inconsistency in the contradiction that the committee has continually proven to have year over year, week over week. We've effectively just said, is the committee even experts? Do we agree that they're experts or not?
Your athletic director's on there.
Okay, well, we've effectively just handed over the rights to subjectively choose the best 4. How often are we wrong on the best 4? I mean, even I take Washington and Oregon. I mean, Washington was a 10-point dog in that game, right? Lot of logic, lot of people thought Oregon was the better team, and guess what? Washington beat them again.
Sure.
So to me, it's like when you have this conversation of the best 4, there's a contradiction in and of itself. Georgia's one of the best 4 teams in college football.
Right.
Why aren't they in by that logic? And I get it. I do. You absolutely have to factor in. I know Florida State's not the same team. I get that. But they still ran the table. They're undefeated. They're a conference champion to be. They've earned the right. If they get dogged in the playoff, that's fine. They earned the right to get dogged in the playoff. They also earned the right to have a chance to compete for a national title. That's my issue, is there's been such a lack of consistency in logic. I just can't understand how we continue to do this moving forward.
I mean, I think your logic is flawed, and that's where I'm going to start there. They've earned the right. How would they have earned the right? Because they went 13-0?
Yeah,
but who
exactly.
Did they play en route to the 13-0? Like, that's the biggest question for me, because I can look at all the teams that made it into the college football playoff, and I'm glad you brought up Washington. How do we know that they belong in there? Well, they beat Oregon twice. What was Oregon? They were a team heading into championship weekend after the regular season was over. They were a team that was in the college football playoff conversation with just 1 loss. You know who else was in there? Ohio State, heading into that last weekend of the college football season. They were a contender. Michigan won that game. We know they can beat a good team. And go right on down the list. We mentioned Washington. What about Texas? Texas beat Alabama earlier in the year. What is Alabama? A 1-loss conference champ. They are a CFP contender just by prototype. We know Texas can beat a good team. Alabama beat Georgia. Undefeated Georgia. Alabama beat them in the conference championship game. We know they can win a big game. You know what Georgia didn't do? They didn't beat anybody that was a contender this year. That's why they're out. You know what Ohio State didn't do? They didn't beat anybody that was a contender by the end of the year. That's why they're out. And Florida State, not to their own fault, they didn't beat anybody that was a contender this year. Their best win was a 3-loss LSU team. Second best win, a 3-loss Louisville team. And then we're getting down here to the Clemsons of the world. We're getting down here to teams that wouldn't even be able to sniff the college football playoff this year. And so I think a lot of people are trying to make this about, oh, this is your opinion and this is how you feel about things, and oh, this is what they did. And what I would say is I think a lot of people are having feelings. They feel like Florida State deserved to be in there. They feel like by resume, Florida State's one of the best teams. And what I can tell you is I know Michigan, Washington, Texas, Alabama. They can beat the type of teams that are in the college football playoff. What I do not know and what I would be going off of vibes and feelings for is that Florida State could do it because they didn't. They didn't all year.
You are going off vibes and feelings by subject. Yes, you are. So where do you draw the line for a contender? You said Georgia didn't beat any contenders. Ole Miss, Missouri.
They were a two-loss team before the end of the year.
Though.
There's never been a two-loss team.
You cannot deny that. You cannot deny that they're not two good teams.
What I'm getting
so
at
Louisville
is a
how about the context?
An undefeated team by the end of the year is a contender.
How about the context? Okay, all right, I get it. Louisville's not a national title contender, right? I mean, look,
they lost to a 3-win
you could say
team.
TCU last year was not a national title contender, right?
Like they felt that way.
Okay, but even back then we didn't choose the best four. Okay, so Louisville is not a contender. Still a damn good football team. I get it, they had a bad loss, but guess what? Florida State beat them with their third-string quarterback.
Bad losses. They lost to an average, very average Kentucky team in the last week of the year. Florida State fans want to be mad at something. They should be mad at Kentucky for not holding up, or at Louisville for not holding up their end of the bargain against Kentucky. If Louisville wins that game, Kentucky loses that game, they go in, they're playing a one-loss team in the conference championship game, probably makes their win feel a lot better. But it's not, because we understand that Louisville is not that good of a football team. Not contender level, good football team, not contender level. That's been their schedule, and it's not their fault. I'm not trying to say this about Florida State, but what I am saying is there are assumptions that I would have to make about their ability to beat a very good football team. And we didn't even talk about, Jake, but the quarterback situation. Like, just based off of that alone, the committee is allowed to factor in injuries, like important information that you would make decisions on about somebody's ability to compete. And that's what they did. There's nothing in there that says they have to put in an undefeated Power 5 conference champ. Nothing says that. And so this is where we are.
Let's talk about the quarterback situation. Let's use another analogy. So, undefeated New England Patriots are playing the New York Giants. It's Tom Brady versus Eli Manning. And guess what? Why even play the game? The Patriots are even better. Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time versus Eli Manning. And guess what? This is what makes football so great. And this is my biggest issue with it. It's not a bad analogy. This is my biggest issue with it. They did not have a great record, right?
How did they get there, though? Because they won in the postseason.
Sure.
They beat teams that were contenders.
And they had a chance to get. And they had a chance to get to the postseason.
There ain't that many spots, bro.
What makes football so great is you have so few games. And guess what? When you lose and when you make a mistake, that's why it's so painful. That's why this loss for Ohio State, Michigan is painful, is you have a fleeting opportunity, and guess what? There's a winner and there's a loser. The NBA doesn't have it, the MLB doesn't have it. Any individual game doesn't matter. In football, the individual games do matter. And winning can look 100 different ways. You have to win. Florida State ran the table and they won. And guess what? Sure, yes, Louisville, you can make the point. They had a third-string quarterback and they still beat a damn good Louisville team.
You want to talk about third-string quarterbacks and what you need to do to get into the college football playoff with a third-string quarterback, because I've been there before. Personally, you know what that quarterback needs to do? They need to throw for 257 yards and 3 touchdowns. And you know what your starting running back should probably do? They should probably run for 8 yards a carry. And you know what your defense needs to do? They need to put a goose egg up there on the scoreboard. They need to stop a Heisman finalist running back who rushed for 418 yards just a couple weeks before, hold him to about 80 in that game. And then maybe people will say, well, damn, this team can compete in the college football playoff. And they didn't do that. It did not look like that.
Why play anything right now? We have just let the committee up here in the ether say, guess what? You guys get to choose the best 4. The best 4. Why is Georgia not in? Why is Bama not ranked? Why is Bama not ranked higher than the 4th place? Because we're saying they're the best 4. We like the Georgia win. Why isn't Bama number 2?
Because
you see what I mean? These are contradicting itself.
Texas had a head-to-head. It's not contradictory. We saw that play. We saw that game on the field.
But it's not. That doesn't matter apparently, right? Because it's the best 4.
It all matters.
It's the best 4 based on feelings. Like you just said, it's the best 4 based on feelings.
Can we pull up Mark Carman's comment real quick? Because I think he put this, summed it up pretty well for us. If we're going to talk about a team, 58th strength of schedule here, no wins versus the current top 12. Why would anybody schedule hard if all you have to do is go 13-0? It's the whole reason nobody ever took the Group of 5 champions seriously. It's the reason UCF has a banner up in their stadium after they beat Auburn in a bowl game. They thought they should be in, and they didn't get in because nobody respected the teams that they played. And Florida State's schedule is certainly much better than what UCF played that year. But the idea that they did not play a team that could sniff the college football playoff this year and beat them in a game, it's a no-go for me.
These are very gray areas and subjective lines of competitor versus non-competitor, strength of schedule. What's the difference between the 40 or the 60? You know what I mean? Like what the difference between 1 and 4 in college football is equal to the distance between like 10 and 50, right? Like there is competitors, and then it's a little gray area, and then there's a big distance. Florida State did enough to have the chance to compete. That's my opinion. I know that if it was my team and my situation, I would say it's a team sport, and we would have had the chance, should have had the chance to get it. Okay, that's that. Coming up, we've had issues with the All Big Ten. We got issues all around.
With everything.
But we've had issues with the All Big Ten teams that were named last week, so we have a solution of our own. Yes, JP and I are going to agree on some type of solution. Check it out on the other side of the break.
now that we've caught our breath here on Red Corner, Blue Corner, we got to unpack some other issues that we've had. Jake, are you good?
I'm good.
I think I'm good, too.
Yeah.
It was good to get that off of our chest,
Yeah.
though.
I like arguing with you because I'm okay arguing with you because I know your opinions are well thought out, and I can handle that, right? I know you're coming from a place of logic and reason, and I can always handle that.
You're coming from the same place, so it's good to hash it out every once in a while. But we got some other issues, like I said before, and these other issues are with the all Big Ten teams that were announced last week. So we thought, why not come up with our own all-conference team? So we're going to do it this week, and we're going to do it with a little twist. Jake and I are going to draft our all RCBC teams. It's a snake draft, which means no sharing players. We have a list of positions we have to fill, and at the end of the week, you, the fans, will determine whose team would win head-to-head. Now, Jake Butt, you had the honors of getting the first pick, so let the people know who you're going with.
I'm going with J.J. McCarthy. So the key here that you said is once a player's off the board, he's off the board. It's just like the NFL draft. There's no double picks. So to me, I thought J.J. was far and away the best quarterback in the conference, obviously the most important position. So I knew if I had J.J., you were going to be stuck kind of picking from the rest of the field. So I went with J.J.
You made my draft strategy really easy because once you took the quarterback, there's only one quarterback to take. I was like, you know what? I'm going to just pick my guy last.
Yes.
I agree with you. J.J. far and away the best quarterback out there. But for my pick, I went with the best O-line.
And that did the same thing to me.
And that's the Michigan offensive line. And even with injuries, this is still a well-put-together, well-coached group. They've done a really good job of keeping J.J. McCarthy upright. There was really one game where they had some pass pro issues. And I got one of the guys who gave them the biggest issues down the line here, too. So
and they'll go 6 or 7 at times, too. They're deep.
Yeah, I expect them to be able to keep my quarterback upright and open up some running lanes. And then for my next pick, I've got the best receiver in the conference, Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't know who's going to be throwing to him quite yet, but what I do know is this guy can erase some issues. We saw it with his connection with McCord this year on the football field. He's got all the tools.
Yeah.
You know what he is as a player. I had to have him on my team.
So you're building a nice, because you got the Michigan O-line to protect your quarterback, and then you got the best weapon outside. So that's a good start. I got the best quarterback, and then I wanted to go back into the backfield. So I wanted to combine J.J. with an elite backfield. So my 4th and 5th pick, I went with Trey Henderson from Ohio State. Speed, he's kind of the lightning here, and then Blake Corum's more the thunder. So I went with back-to-back running backs, understanding even here, I felt there was a drop-off between these two at the top of the conference. So my issue is you got the best offensive line, but I figured these two guys solve problems. I could put them both in the backfield at the same time. I went quarterback, Trey Henderson, and then, of course, my 5th pick, Blake Corum after Trey Henderson. So, JP, what do you think about the start to the draft here?
A pretty good start. I mean, you've got some really good offensive skill there. Blake Corum, a guy, too, who can fit through small spaces. We see what Travion Henderson does with his ability to break away, so definitely like those picks. But I figured I had to get someone to cause some trouble in your backfield since it's so stacked. So I went with Chop Robinson. I felt like that was an obvious pick for me. Go out and get the best pass rusher in the conference. You see some of the numbers this year, maybe doesn't speak to how disruptive he truly can be. And when you unleash him, especially against maybe the type of offensive line he's going to be going against, I think he can cause problems. And then, you start to put together a good quarterback. We know that there's some receiver depth in this conference, so I figured I might as well go for secondary here. I want to pick a corner, a guy who I can build my program around. Will Johnson's that guy for me. He has been locked down. It's when you don't hear the name of a defensive back throughout a game, it's a great thing, right? Because it means he's not blowing coverages. It means he's not getting cooked. The only time you hear his name is when it's a PBU interception.
He's got great length, too, man. I mean, you talk about just the ability to solve issues. That's Will Johnson. Okay, so you started taking some defensive guys there with Chop. I had to answer it a little bit, and I went with back-to-back defensive guys. So I started with Johnny Newton, and I feel great getting him at pick 8 here because he's the defensive player of the year for the entire conference. How about those numbers right there? Extremely impressive, extremely disruptive. I think I've started to fall in love with good interior defensive linemen because of they just solve problems. They push the pocket. He is so damn disruptive. I was really happy to get him there at number 8. Number 9, because you took Will Johnson, I had to answer with who I thought was going to be the next best corner here, and that's Cooper DeJean. I also like the ability, we're not going to talk returners here, but I like the ability knowing I can put him at punt returner and he'll make some plays.
As long as he doesn't invalid fair catch.
When the ball is thrown his direction, though, JP, he doesn't really even have that. I mean, he's got 5 PPUs. He picks the ball off, though. He's always in position. And Kirk Ferentz has coached a lot of great football players, said Cooper DeJean was one of the best he's coached on any team at any position throughout his whole career.
Tend to agree with that. And since there was a run on defensive backs, I figured I had to finish out my cornerback room. I went with Denzel Burke. I think Cooper DeJean is really good. I think Denzel is right there with Cooper DeJean and Will Johnson. You see the numbers here, the PBUs, forced fumble, which means he's physical. You see the TFLs in there, so when they're pulling guys around the edge, you know these guys getting after it. They like to use them on corner blitzes. I think he was the right choice.
So take a look at this and make sure you guys stick around with us because we're going to slowly reveal our teams throughout the week leading up to. We're going to ask your opinion, who you think is going to win this. I got the quarterback, JP's got the O-line, and then you can start to see the philosophy developed right here. JP, let me ask you, what do you think? How do you feel about your team so far?
We're cooking you.
We're cooking you. I feel the same thing about my team.
We're cooking.
Well, we're going to need you guys, though. Again, you guys have to stick around with us throughout the week because we'll be doing about 5 a day, right? Five picks a day or so, and then we'll show you the final drafts. You guys will see Team Red Corner, Team Blue Corner. We'll need you to vote.
All right, well, we're going to take a break right here because me and Jake got a little more smack to talk right now. But on the other side, the guys from Rivals Down South will be waiting in the wings to talk some playoffs. And you know, just like us, they've got some opinions too. That's coming up next right here on Stadium.
approximately 5 hours into a Disney drive. Just watched the college football playoff reveal. A black day for college football indeed. Pride and hubris rule the day. Gone are the days in which you earned something by play on the field, in which you earned something by going undefeated, by beating everybody you played. Now it is opinion, it is politics that rules the galaxy. This, like, for all the complaints of, oh, NIL, transfer portal, it's tearing away at college football. No. This is what ruined. This legitimately eats away at the fabric of college football.
Well, that was an emotional T-Bob. We appreciate you sending that in and have some fun at Disney. But now it's time for the conference clash. We got our guy, SEC Mike. We got Hudson Mason joining the show. Jake and I already let our opinions be known. I think the committee 100% got it right. Jake is on the other side. But, fellas, we want to know how you feel. So, Hudson, we'll start with you. I mean, where are you at on the committee?
Yeah, I think the committee got it right, guys. I know that's kind of an unpopular opinion today, but the first mandate of the committee is to get the 4 best teams, and not the 4 conference champions or the 4 undefeated teams, the 4 best teams. And unfortunately, what I saw from Louisville the last 2 weeks, specifically on offense, they were a shell of themselves. And in my opinion, whether it be the Florida game or the ACC championship game this week, if Glenn or Rodemaker in any of those games had given the committee something to feel good about offensively, something more than completing 48% of their passes against a bad Florida pass defense, or 8 of 21 for 55 yards against Louisville, I think the committee would have put them in. But unfortunately, they didn't give offensively enough for the committee to justify putting them in over Alabama. So I think the committee absolutely got it right.
SEC Mike, before you go real quick, I want to address this comment we got here. The bottom of the screen says, Joshua Perry just looks stupid and he is only supporting Bama because he thinks they'll beat Michigan. No, I'm supporting Bama because they actually beat good teams this year. They beat a playoff caliber team this year, and Florida State did not. And quite frankly, to what Hudson was saying, they didn't even look like the same team. Their defense played lights out. I'll give them all the credit on that side of the football. That offense was not it. That is not a playoff caliber offense, but I'll let SEC Mike go.
Yeah, and I can speak to the T-Bob comments, why he was so down and in the dumps. He was dancing on the grave of Alabama and Georgia all Saturday, texting me. So that's where that anger and hurt is coming from. But I'll tell you guys, we're sitting here saying the committee, I agree, putting Alabama in over Florida State. But I'll tell you, the committee got it wrong, because what did Hudson just say right there? The 4 best teams. I don't care if Washington went undefeated, Michigan and their cheating went undefeated. Put Georgia in this field. Georgia is a top 4 without a doubt, and I get it. They didn't earn their way in. Well, I don't know that Alabama earned their way in, because didn't Florida State just earn their way? But apparently that doesn't matter either. It's the 4 best. Georgia's on the outside looking in. I don't know how they would have got Georgia Bulldogs in there, but if it's the 4 best, Georgia deserved to be in the conversation.
SEC Mike, that's my point too. Is the contradiction? So it's the 4 best, but we're going to leave Georgia out? Like, aren't they the 4 best?
Georgia had the opportunity to prove they were the best against Alabama.
But we're talking about the 4 best. But we're still talking about the 4 best.
They did not beat
about the 4 best.
Georgia did not beat a playoff caliber team all year. That's where I'm drawing the line on this one. I think it's pretty simple. The teams that have beaten playoff caliber teams this year, the 4 of them are in there, period.
Oregon's
Ask
a playoff.
Texas.
Oregon's a
They
playoff.
finished the regular season 11-1.
They lost twice to the only team they had a chance to prove they were a playoff.
They finished the regular season 11-1. Had they beat Washington, they would have been the college football playoff.
Hudson, Mike, when did this become about the best 4? Because TCU got in last year. Wasn't Bama, wasn't Tennessee? Didn't we think those teams were better than TCU? Like, all of a sudden, just this year in these past few weeks, it was the best 4.
Well, Tennessee had the Hendon Hooker thing, though. We couldn't have put them in.
Best 4.
I would have put them in. I'm a Tennessee grad. Put them in. But, no, I'm going off what the committee's saying. The committee's saying it, not me. This is the committee's language, the best 4. And, again, is Florida State a best 4? No. But they've earned their way, so they have proven they're going with the best 4. And Georgia, I don't think there's a doubt in my mind they're a top 4 team.
Yeah, the Georgia conversation is interesting, right?
Welcome in, Rivals
Georgia
Down
thing-
South. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, you go.
Welcome in, Rivals Down South. As you can tell, T-Bob's not here. I'm already screwing up the intro. He's Hudson Mason, Georgia quarterback, ESPN analyst. Carry on, Hudson. I'm sorry for cutting you off there.
No, that's my bad, guys. So what I was going to say is that the Georgia piece of that is kind of interesting to me, right? Because when you say the 4 best teams, it seems like the committee – I believe Georgia is one of the 4 best teams in the country, better than Washington. And the committee kind of went halfway with the 4 best teams, but didn't go all the way with the 4 best teams. And so it's like, if you're going to go half the way with 4 best teams, shouldn't we go all the way? I never thought – as soon as Georgia lost Saturday night, Louisville won, I knew they were out of the conversation. And so I never – realistically thought Georgia had a chance to get it in. But of course, there's hypocrisy littered in this, and there always has been an element of hypocrisy. If you're going to put the 4 best teams in, what sense does, or in your rankings in general, what sense does it have for Florida State to be ranked 1 spot ahead of Georgia? I mean, I still think Georgia is a better team than Florida State. So it just is. There's hypocrisy. There's no doubt about it. Everybody's mad about hypocrisy, how it doesn't make sense. And I think, when you have a playoff format that only allows 4 teams to get into your playoff format, it shows that it's pretty dumb. It's pretty antiquated. And it's going to leave a lot of people once a year. It's going to leave somebody, some fan base, some school, some coaches that probably have a strong argument and a good chance to get in, really pissed off.
I know if I was a Florida State fan, I'd be pretty pissed today, but I'm happy because that's the worst fan base in the country. We can agree on that, right?
No, absolutely not.
Who's worse than Florida State fans? Maybe you'd probably say Michigan.
Well, the last couple of years, they've been going a little bit crazy.
Look, I got an issue with Florida State because, hey, that was the last game of my college career, and I tore my dang ACL in that game, so I got beef with them anyways, but I was still on their side here. But, Hudson, I'm just thinking about, what you're saying with the committee contradicting itself. And this is probably my issue because going forward, even with the expanding playoff, like the principle of this doesn't exactly change because we're letting, humans basically subjectively pick and choose who they believe to be is the best 4. And I think we need to rethink this system going forward, have a little bit more structure. I don't know the plan going forward, but this is what I would expect when you're just having a group of individuals choose the best 4. And again, my issue is like this all of a sudden was the way that they were going to choose the Final 4 this year. I've never heard that argument be as rigid as it is anywhere in the past few years in the 4-team playoff.
I struggle with that because they've made it clear how they feel about injuries, and that's one of the things that they can consider. And the other thing that people are acting like one of the things the committee said is if you are an undefeated Power 5 conference champ, that you must be in the college football playoff. And the reality of the situation is that never made any damn sense to begin with because there are 4 spots for 5 power conferences. What, they all went undefeated, then what? Right? Like, that's the wild part about that premise. People are acting like they had to be in there. The other thing that we're relying on, which really bothers me, is this idea that because Florida State was undefeated, that they need to be in. Not all schedules are created equally. Not all conferences are created equally. And I can say, without a shadow of the doubt, that the fact that they do not have a top 12 win in the final rankings, the strength of schedule is not up to par with the rest of the teams in there. That is enough for me to know that 13-0 with somebody else's schedule could have easily been a 12-1 and 11-2. That's the reality of the situation.
So next year, we're going to have to remember this next year because the Big Ten, when you look at that schedule, it is going to be an absolute gauntlet. They have one more conference game than SEC teams. So guess what? There's going to be some Big Ten teams with 2 losses that are tough. Maybe even 3 losses, but they might have 5 ranked wins. It seriously could be that brutal and that competitive in the Big Ten where teams are playing 8 or 9 top 25 matchups. So you might have 3 losses, but you'll have 5 or 6 ranked wins. By that logic, then that team should still get in this year since it's not just about the final record.
I think a 3-loss team is getting in the new format.
Yeah, I'm not for sure, guys, if 12 teams really fixes it. Maybe there's something coming down the tracks that I can't see. It seems as though on the surface, like, hey, maybe we won't have to argue about this as much, or maybe, all the deserving teams that deserve to get in will get in. But, one of the things that kind of has drove me nuts is the analogy or the comparison to 2014 Ohio State, right? And how they blew Wisconsin out with their third string quarterback. And it's such a bad analogy and a bad example to me, in my opinion, because number one, they won 59-0. And number two, Cardero Jones did kind of the exact opposite what, Tate Rodemaker or Brock Glenn did. They played well. Like in that game, the third string quarterback, Cordero Jones, in 2014 threw for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. And so if Glenn or Rodemaker had played any resemblance of that type of game against Florida or against Louisville, I think the committee puts him in. I think the committee was sitting there begging, looking for a reason to put Florida State in. And offensively, they just looked at it and they said, we can't justify that that's one of the 4 best teams right now without their Heisman-type quarterback. So when that comparison is made to Ohio State as to why Florida State should get in, I just think it's a bad one.
Yeah, I was on that team. I was on the field during that game. I take offense to that comparison for all of the reasons that you said. In Florida State, I give them all the credit in the world how they played defensively, but you mentioned the goose egg on the other side, right? This is a defense, my defense for Ohio State, that was facing a Heisman finalist running back in Melvin Gordon. He rushed for like 400 yards a couple weeks before. Duke comes out there, we limit him to 80 some odd yards. You also had the running back on the other side in Ezekiel Elliott, who was running it for 8 yards a carry in that game. There is a complete difference to how this thing went down. It wasn't just a quarterback, but where was there Devin Smith? Where was there Ezekiel Elliott as well? That probably would have gave people a little bit more confidence too.
You're giving me flashbacks here of a game I do not want to rehash. So, Jake, Josh, we got to let you go. I'm about to start breaking into tears if I think about Ohio State winning a national championship again. I appreciate you guys from Red Corner, Blue Corner. We got to get down to some business, some SEC football.
All right, take care.
All right, so Alabama, man, what a surprise here. Beats Georgia. Hudson, I know this. I'm not trying to bring up a bad memory here. I'm sure. Did the sun come up in the state of Georgia on Sunday? That's what I really want to know. Alabama stuns the nation 27-24. And, I mean, Georgia came out strong. They came right out. I thought they were going to whoop Alabama after that first drive, shutting down Alabama. But basically from the first couple possessions on, I mean, this was Alabama's game to win. Thoughts on Georgia going down after a 29-game winning streak, Hudson?
Well, to answer your question about how mad people are, SEC Mike, doing a morning radio show here in Atlanta for 680 The Fan, I got to tell you, I don't think people here in the state of Georgia have been as mad at each other since the 2020 election. I mean, they are screaming at each other all over the phones. I mean, there is nobody happy right now. We got mom screaming at daughters. We got dads screaming at sons. We got people throwing things. I mean, it is pure chaos. People are livid. Not only with, Georgia not being able to win, but with Georgia not getting into the college football playoff. And I think Georgia fans, have a very good case to stand on and feeling like they're one of the 4 best teams after a 29-game win streak, losing by 3 points in a neutral site to Alabama. So, but back to the game. As a former player myself watching that game, Mike, I have to tip my cap to Alabama. I know every fan base has its form of people who want to blame the refs, and that call on the 4th down pass should have been incomplete, and it led to 7 points, and that's a big mistake. But at the end of the day, the adjustments that Nick Saban made after the opening drive, the defensive game plan, the pressure that they got on Carson Beck was better than any game plan and caused problems for Mike Bobo and Carson Beck. And so I look at that team and I go, that's Alabama. That's what happens when you play a team that's just as good as you, that's just as physical, big, fast, and strong, and has recruited at the level and has the greatest college football coach of all time.
Right, and I'm glad you hit on Mike Bobo and Carson Beck. The Mike Bobo hire at the time, obviously you would know a lot better than I would, but I thought he was wildly successful at Georgia, but the fans, maybe not the most popular guy. And then here, coming off this great season of offense, he's a finalist for the Broyles Award given to the nation's best assistant coach. He did a tremendous job. Carson Beck looks like an emerging NFL prospect. Yet after this game, we got the Georgia fans mad again. Mike Bobo, he got us again. Carson Beck, he came up short when the light was shining the brightest. But do you take issue with any of those comments, or is this, Brock Bowers certainly didn't look like himself. A lot of Georgia receivers were banged up for this football game. Is it fair to criticize those guys, or do you put it more on the injuries and just giving credit to Alabama and their coaching staff?
Yeah, I think I just give more credit to Alabama, man. I mean, Georgia hadn't faced a front four like Alabama. Georgia hadn't faced guys in the secondary. I mean, when Kool-Aid McKinstry went out, Amos comes in at corner and kind of picks right up where Kool-Aid McKinstry picked up or left off. And so I think for me, it's hard to watch that game. Every coordinator has a player or two he wants back. Every quarterback has a throw or two that he wants back. But overall, I can't help but watch that game and go, man, you have to tip your cap to Alabama. The adjustments that Nick Saban made after watching that opening drive and watching Georgia so methodically go down, I thought, boy, this is going to get ugly for Alabama today. And Nick Saban does what elite coaches do at any level in football. He took his game plan and he did this. He did this right here to his game plan all week. He did this and he did that. And he said, guys, you know what? Screw it. We're going from a 3-man front to a 4-man front. We're playing 2 high safeties, and we're going to keep everything in front of us. And Georgia couldn't create the explosive plays. Like, that, to me, is where I tip my cap to Nick Saban. The fact that they had practiced a game plan all week, and after the first drive, Nick Saban told his defensive coordinator, screw it, throw it away. We're making an adjustment, and that adjustment was we're going to get 4 guys rushing the quarterback, and we're going to play split safety, which means 2 high, keep everything in front of us. And that limited the explosive plays. And that's something that Georgia was really good at all year, but they couldn't get it in the passing game on Saturday.
And how important do you think this Orange Bowl matchup against Florida State? And I realize, Georgia, the goal was national championship or bust. So they're going to fall short even if they win this game by 100 points. Well, that's not really what I'm kind of curious about, Hudson. I'm looking at Alabama last year. They fell short. And what did Bryce Young, what did Will Anderson do? They suited up in a game some people call meaningless. I don't consider them meaningless. But I think that set the tone for Nick Saban's program that, hey, we're going to finish strong. And clearly, I think there's some carryover to this year, finishing that deal. How big of a game is this for Georgia, which who knows how many opt-outs we're seeing quarterbacks jump into the portal? How focused will Georgia be, and how much will that kind of give them momentum potentially for the next season?
Yeah, we're about to find out just how good Georgia's culture is, right? Kirby always talks about, hey, our difference is our culture. And games like this that, quote, don't matter are a good example of your culture. To me, there's only one guy that should consider not playing, and that's Brock Bowers. I hope he plays. But there's all this talk about, hey, will this guy sit out, that guy sit out? And if you're not a guaranteed first-round draft pick, you have no business sitting out a bowl game. You need to play because you can improve your draft stock. You have money to make. And so we're really talking about one player, one key important player. That's a huge piece, but it's really just one player for Georgia. And I don't know what the show up is gonna look like for Georgia fans. I was talking to a season ticket holder today, and he says that he's on a group text with 12 other season ticket holders, and none of them are going down to Miami. And so, I call it the kind of suck your thumb method, kind of like what happened maybe to Clemson a little bit, where, man, if you don't make the college football playoff, you're kind of like, what's the point of traveling and going seeing your team? And I'm not, at least early on, hearing that Georgia fans are going to go down to Miami and show up in droves for this game against Florida State.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up here on bowl season in the SEC. We're going to break down some of these matchups, and the portal just opened up. So quarterbacks, teams needing a quarterback, we'll get to that next. Our rivals down south. Welcome back in, Rivals Down South. The best time of the year, bowl season, holiday season. And man, we got some great games here. SEC sending more teams to the New Year's Six than anticipated with Florida State not making the playoffs. So, hey, the SEC keeps winning, Hudson. And let's start with the Rose Bowl, one of the most, iconic scenes in all of college football. Number 4, Alabama. Number 1, Michigan. Although I think they got that backwards. Alabama just beat number 1, so you got to make them number 1. How surprised are you that Michigan opened as a slight favorite against the Crimson Tide? I was stunned.
Yeah, I think, what was it, 1.5? I think I saw earlier in today, so a slight favorite for Michigan. This feels like the national championship game, in all honesty. And I know what Texas did on Saturday, and they look offensively as good as possible. But this just feels like the national championship game. And there was that video that was released of the watch party in Ann Arbor, Michigan, when the Michigan team was sitting around, and then it was revealed that they got to play Alabama. Boy, you couldn't hear a pin drop in that room. And they were definitely and clearly hoping that they were going to play Florida State. And so this is going to be a fun matchup. I think my concerns for Michigan are they going to be explosive enough in the passing game? The same kind of concerns I've had for them on the biggest stages, even going back to last year when they lost to TCU and J.J. McCarthy. Is he going to be able to make enough throws in crunch time moments? And when they put the ball in his right hand, you can't hide your star players, and your quarterback on the best team in the country is a star player just naturally by the position. And so early on, I like Alabama in this game.
Mm-hmm. How about the Peach Bowl, Hudson? We got Ole Miss, Penn State. This is the team from the SEC, the Rebels, that kind of squeezed into that New Year's Six. They were not headed there. It didn't look like till Sunday. Both these coaches, I think you could argue, Lane Kiffin, James Franklin, desperate for a big win. They rack up wins against cupcakes. They typically don't win the big game. Who do you think needs this one more, Lane Kiffin or James Franklin?
I would probably say James Franklin. Their offense has been pretty anemic all year, especially in the games that matter the most. But I like Ole Miss. Now, you get to these games, SEC, Mike, you gotta fact check and you got to do your homework, because these are the games that it really matters who's playing. If it's not a college football playoff, like, you better watch the line and you better make sure that the star players are playing, because these are the games that sometimes players will sit out because it's not a playoff game. And this is where, if an impact player or two is missing, it can change the outcome of a game in a major way.
Well, I call him Lane Whiffen for a reason. I'm sure he'll make that excuse. All right, how about the Cotton Bowl? We got Missouri, Ohio State. I think this is really a showdown that'll prove superiority between SEC, Big Ten. Everybody's got respect for Ohio State. Everybody thinks Mizzou's just a joke. I think this is one to watch. This could be one of the best non-playoff games of the entire bowl season.
Yeah, I agree with you, right? What Missouri has done this year, Cody Schrader running the ball, being one of the leading rushers in the SEC East, kind of coming out of the middle of nowhere. Brady Cook played really good at the quarterback position. Luther Burden. What Eli Drinkwitz did this year, especially on offense, is really the story, probably the best story in the SEC, given the fact that they were picked in the preseason to finish 6th in the SEC East. And then for Ohio State, Kyle McCord has entered the transfer portal. And who's going to be playing quarterback? I mean, like this, I don't know what the line is off the top of my head. I haven't checked this one yet. But that in itself gives you reason to consider taking Missouri in this matchup. And Missouri's going to want to be there, right? They haven't played in a big game like this, in a bowl game, in a long time. Ohio State kind of maybe feeling a little sorry for themselves that they didn't, get to the playoffs. So this will be, I agree with you, this will be one of the more entertaining non-playoff games.
Right. And coming up, another great time of the year if you're a college football team in need of help, because the portal is open. It's really free agency is what it should actually be called. We're going to be talking to some of these quarterbacks that have entered the portal. Well, back to Rivals Down South here, and we're talking transfer quarterbacks in the portal. This is a season of optimism. We can flip ahead, look ahead to 2024, get excited. We don't have a quarterback now. We may have one by the end of the week, and we've got some elite prospects in the portal, including Kyle McCord from Ohio State, nearly went to the college football playoff. Dylan Gabriel, Heisman candidate to in the free agent market. I mean, this is a wild time here, Hudson. Any of these jump, and right before we hopped on, Brock Vandagriff, someone that I'm sure you're familiar with, entered the portal.
Yeah.
Who's someone you think is got to be, if you're an SEC team eager for a quarterback, who's got to be highest on your board right now?
You talking about players or what teams are in the market?
I'm talking, yeah, if I'm a team that needs a quarterback, who's that one quarterback that I'm dying to get on my roster?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think Dylan Gabriel is atop that list just because, he played so well this year, right? I mean, that decision to leave is just flabbergasted me. I don't, the Kyle McCord decision to leave Ohio State, I think on the surface surprised a lot of people, including myself. It's like, where are you going to go to get better development, better coaching, better weapons? But that just kind of screams that maybe they kind of pushed Kyle McCord out the door. The Dylan Gabriel one, to me, I have no idea why he's leaving. He's played great this year, is in a great spot. Maybe he's going to follow his offensive coordinator, Jeff Lebby, to Mississippi State. Watch out for that. And then you mentioned Brock Vandagriff, one of the prize recruits a couple years ago, 5-star recruit, backup this year to Carson Beck, is going to be hitting the portal. But he doesn't have the starting experience that guys like Kyle McCord, DJU out at Oregon State, Cam Ward, and some of those guys have.
Right, and I'm glad you hit on that. Jeff Lebby to Mississippi State. I mean, that's a program in the dumps, obviously under Zach Arnett. We're sixth in the West. We got no shot. We bring in Jeff Lebby. Maybe we can bring in his quarterback. All of a sudden, if I'm a Mississippi State fan, you could sell me on that all day long. Look at LSU. You just brought in Jaden Daniels. In 2 years, you turn him into a likely Heisman winner. You have to think that they're going to be in the mix for some of these quarterbacks. I mean, it's a wild time. And with Texas coming in, with Oklahoma coming in, we don't even know, Mason, if a guy like KJ Jefferson from Arkansas, that has been reported that he may be looking to get into the portal. But with Bobby Petrino coming in as offensive coordinator, maybe that mixes things up. It's just a weird time. We got to convince KJ to come back, or we got to figure out if we need a free agent. If I'm Bobby Petrino, what a weird spot to be in here for Arkansas.
Yeah, very weird. And, when you look at the SEC and really all of college football, but look at the SEC in general, how many teams can you say right now that their current starting quarterback will be back next year? Carson Beck at Georgia, if he decides to come back, Jalen Milroe at Alabama. I mean, there's not a lot. So turnover in college football.
Well, we'll be here to cover it all on Rivals Down South all week long. Appreciate you guys watching. We'll catch you on the next one.